Have you ever just stopped and thought about how fascinatingly strange we are as human beings? I mean, on one hand, we can be incredibly predictable. We'll all jump on a new trend, try the same diet, or follow a risky tip. But then we'll turn right around and do something that seems to defy all logic, sometimes even our own safety.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Why do we act the way we do? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden scripts that are secretly guiding our behavior. We're going to see the powerful forces that make us copy each other, and then we'll dive right into our own minds at the tricky glitches and chemical reactions that lead to our most baffling, contradictory choices.
All right, first up, let's talk about one of the most fundamental ways we operate. It turns out a huge chunk of our behavior isn't really original at all. It's copied. You, me, all of us. We're basically copycats. So this big idea comes from a psychologist named Albert Bandura. His social learning theory basically says that we are hardwired to learn by watching what he called a model. Just think about it for a second. We learn super complex things, like a new dance move or how to act in a new social situation, just by watching somebody else do it. And often, there's no direct instruction or immediate reward involved. We just watch and learn.
But here's the really interesting part. We don't just copy things automatically. Bandura figured out there's a whole 4-step process that happens in our minds first. Number 1, you have to actually pay attention to the behavior. 2, you've got to remember what you saw. 3, you have to physically be able to reproduce it. And 4, and this is the real kicker, you have to be motivated to do it. And where does that motivation come from? Well, we see the person we're copying get some kind of reward, and our brain goes, hey, I want that too.
Okay, so copying others is a huge piece of the puzzle. But it's not the whole story, not even close. Sometimes, the most powerful influences on our behavior are completely internal. Our own minds have these, you could call them tricky glitches or mental shortcuts that shape what we do in some really strange and contradictory ways.
So you can think of it like this. Social learning is all about looking outward for clues on how to act. But cognitive biases? That's all about looking inward. These are like systematic errors in our own mental software that cause us to be irrational, and they lead to those totally head-scratching behaviors that just don't seem to make any logical sense.
And this right here perfectly explains why we sometimes act completely against our own best interests. See, our brains are built to be efficient, not always to be accurate. Confirmation bias is what keeps us stuck in our own bubble, only listening to things we already agree with. The availability heuristic is why you might be terrified of a shark attack, even though you're way more likely to get in a car accident on the way to the beach. And anchoring? That can make us spend way more money than we planned, just because of the first price we saw. These little shortcuts explain so many of our contradictions.
So, we've got the external scripts we copy and the internal shortcuts our brains take. But what's the engine driving all of this? What's powering the whole system? To figure that out, we have to go deeper, all the way down to the chemical level. All right, first, let's meet dopamine. You've probably heard it called the pleasure molecule, but it's actually more accurate to think of it as the motivation molecule. It's the chemical that pushes you, that drives you to seek out rewards. You know that feeling of anticipation? That thrill you get right before you do something exciting or even kind of risky? That's dopamine flooding your brain, basically screaming, "Go for it! This could be awesome!" And then, on the other side of the coin, you have serotonin. Think of this one as your internal mood stabilizer. When your serotonin levels are balanced, you feel calmer, more in control. But when they're low, that can lead to anxiety, to impulsiveness. It's why one day you might snap at someone over something tiny, and the next day the same thing wouldn't bother you at all. That chemical roller coaster has a direct impact on the quality of your decisions. And that's really the absolute key here. It's not just one thing. It's this incredibly complex and dynamic dance going on between different parts of your brain and these chemicals. This is where our emotional triggers are born. That incredible rush of a thrill, the paralyzing grip of fear, that deep-seated desire for control. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are the direct result of your brain chemistry pulling the levers on your choices, for better or for worse.
So after all that, after learning about the social scripts, the mental glitches, and the brain chemistry, it kind of makes you wonder, are we just puppets? Can we actually do anything about this? How can we consciously steer our choices to get a better outcome?
And the answer is a big yes. We can. Look, we can't completely rewire our brains overnight, but we can absolutely learn to work with them. And there's really strong evidence for 5 simple, practical steps we can all take to improve our mental well-being, which in turn gives us more conscious control over our decisions.
And listen, these are not just some fluffy, feel-good ideas. Each one of these actions has a real, tangible impact on your brain chemistry and your mental state. Connecting with people helps buffer you against social pressure. Being active helps balance out your dopamine and serotonin. Learning a new skill builds self-esteem so you can trust your own judgment. These steps give you the mental space to actually pause to challenge those automatic and often flawed scripts we've been talking about.
So here's the bottom line. We are all influenced by these powerful, hidden forces. That's a given. But just understanding them, knowing they exist, that's your superpower. We can't erase the strict, but we can learn to improvise. Knowing why you do what you do gives you the power to choose what you'll do next. So the only question left is, how are you going to write your next scene?